Captain Eli Thorne, a grizzled, seasoned sailor, had been at sea for as long as he could remember. His boat, the Blue Horizon, was the only place he felt he truly belonged. One calm afternoon, as the sun dipped close to the horizon and cast its fiery hues across the endless stretch of water, Eli noticed something unusual bobbing in the distance. Through his telescope, he spotted a small, motionless figure clinging to a piece of driftwood. The image sent a chill through him. Eli had seen strange things out on the open waters, but this looked like a child. A girl, no more than 9 years old. Alone. Her dark hair tangled around her face, and her clothes were torn and soaked through. But what struck him most was her expression, a blank stare that seemed to pierce the distance between them. Eli's heart pounded as he navigated closer, careful not to disturb the fragile piece of wood she clung to. As he leaned over the side of the boat and called to her, she didn't react. Her eyes remained fixed on the horizon as though locked in a trance. "Hey there, miss," he said, his voice as gentle as he could make it. "You're all right now?" "I'm Captain Eli, and I'm here to help." She finally looked at him. Her gaze was intense, wise beyond her years, and when she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I've been waiting." Eli was taken aback. "Waiting? For who?" "For you." "Captain Eli," she said, with a small, eerie smile that left him unsettled. Despite his unease, Eli pulled her aboard, wrapping her in a blanket and offering her some water. As she sipped, Eli found himself bombarded with questions, but something held him back from asking them right away. There was a quiet, haunting calm about her that he couldn't quite put his finger on. "Her name," she said, "was Lila." He asked her, gently, "How long have you been out here?" Lila just tilted her head, seeming to consider the question as if it were somehow irrelevant. "Long enough," she finally answered. "Long enough to forget a lot of things." Despite her cryptic responses, Eli felt a strange pull toward her, a need to protect her, though he couldn't say why. He took her inside the small cabin to let her rest, and as night fell, he began his journey toward the nearest port, still plagued by questions. That night, as Eli was falling asleep, he heard a soft hum. It was Lila, singing an old sea shanty he recognized from his own childhood, one his father used to sing to him. The familiarity of it sent a shiver down his spine. How could she possibly know it? The next morning, Eli tried to get more answers from her, but Lila only gave him more mysterious half-answers. "Are you lost, Lila?" he asked her, hoping she would open up. She shook her head slowly. Not anymore. Eli felt a growing sense of dread. Who was this girl? He found himself studying her face, her mannerisms, the way she seemed unfazed by the vast, merciless ocean surrounding them. It was as if she belonged to it. Every time he looked away, it felt like her gaze was still on him, watching his every move. That night, as Eli navigated through a sudden and unexpected fog, Lila appeared at his side, almost silently. She pointed ahead into the dense gray mist. "You're going the wrong way, Captain." Eli jumped, nearly losing his grip on the helm. "Lila, what are you talking about? This is the path to the port." "No," she insisted, with a strange confidence. "You have to go where I say. I'll show you the way." Against his better judgment, Eli turned the boat as she directed. His rational mind rebelled, but something about her tone, steady, unwavering, made him comply. Soon, he began to notice shapes emerging in the fog, massive rocks, old wrecked ships jutting out of the water, places no sailor would willingly go. "You're bringing us to danger, Lila," he muttered, his grip tightening on the wheel. But she looked up at him, and her eyes glowed with something he couldn't place. "I'm bringing us to the truth." Eli's heart raced. Truth? He felt the edge of panic creeping in. But there was something almost hypnotic about her presence. So he sailed on, deeper into the strange, silent world that seemed to emerge out of nowhere. Suddenly, Lila pointed again, and through the fog, a monstrous shadow began to appear. It was the outline of an old ship, so old it looked as though it had risen from the depths of the sea. Its hull was cracked, covered in barnacles, its sails tattered, flapping in the chill wind. "That's it," she whispered. "That's where I come from." Eli's jaw dropped. "You thought you were on that ship?" Lila nodded slowly. "A long time ago." Eli's mind was reeling. How could that be possible? That ship looked as though it had been lost to the ocean decades, if not centuries, ago. Yet here it was, and here was this strange girl who claimed to have come from it. He knew he should turn around and flee, yet he couldn't move. "Captain Eli," she said, her voice turning soft, almost pleading. "Please. You have to see." With a heavy heart, he turned toward the ancient ship and, as they approached, he felt a suffocating chill wrap around him. When they finally boarded, the reality was even stranger than he'd expected. The ship was filled with relics from an age-long past. Rusted weapons, tattered flags, pieces of jewelry, and portraits covered in dust and mold. Lila led him to the captain's quarters, where an old, moth-eaten logbook lay on the desk, untouched for what seemed like centuries. She motioned for him to open it. His hands trembled as he turned the first page. The writing was faint, the ink almost faded to nothing, but he could still make out the words. It was a passenger manifest from nearly 100 years ago. And there, in the final entry, was a name that struck him like a thunderbolt, Lila Grayson. Beside her name, it read, age, 9. Eli looked at her, horrified. This is impossible." She looked back, her face calm and serene. "I was meant to find you, Captain Eli. We share a bond, you and I." He shook his head. "I don't understand. Why me?" Lila walked closer to him, and as she did, her form seemed to flicker, like she was fading in and out of reality. "Because, Captain Eli, I was your sister." His mind reeled, trying to comprehend. He hadn't had a sister. Or had he? Memories he'd buried deep within him began to resurface, stories his parents had told him of a tragedy at sea, of a sister lost in a storm, a sister he was too young to remember. But the stories had always been dismissed as a distant memory, something he couldn't quite grasp. You're the reason I've always felt drawn to the sea," he whispered, feeling the weight of her words. "Yes," she said. "And now, you found me." Eli's heart twisted with grief, relief, and a strange, eerie sense of closure. She took his hand, her grip cold as ice, and guided him back to the blue horizon. As they left the ghostly ship behind, the fog began to lift, and he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He turned to Lila, but she was gone. All that remained was a small, silver locket he hadn't seen before, resting on the deck where she'd stood. He picked it up, opened it, and saw a tiny portrait of a girl, Lila, smiling back at him. He was left with a bittersweet ache, but he knew, finally, that he had found the missing part of his heart. As the blue horizon sailed toward the morning light, Captain Eli Thorne knew he'd carry Lila with him forever, his guiding star through the endless sea.